I was sitting in a restaurant when I heard my wife telling another man the most brutal things about me. She called me pathetic, boring, a walking ATM. She had no idea her husband was 3 booths away, already starting to plan how I was going to completely dismantle the life she'd gotten so comfortable in. My name is Preston Wells. I'm 45, and I own a logistics company that employs 63 people in 3 different states. I spent 20 years building it from nothing. One truck, one route, one exhausted night at a time, until it turned into a fleet big enough to move mountains, as long as you could pay the invoice. I thought I was building stability for my family. Turns out, I was just building a jackpot someone else was waiting to cash out. My wife, Claudia, and I have been married for 18 years. We have 2 kids, Daniel, 17, right on the edge of college applications, and Iris, 14, who still looks at me like I put the stars in the sky. At least, I'm praying she still feels that way after everything that's about to happen. The night everything shattered started like another routine business dinner. I was at Romano's, this high-end Italian place downtown, trying to close a deal with a potential client from Memphis. It was a big one, around $2 million a year if I secured it. I was tucked into one of those high-backed corner booths that make you feel like no one else in the world exists. That's when I heard her laugh. Claudia was 3 booths behind me, and at first I almost didn't recognize the sound. It was different, sharper, brighter, more alive than anything I'd heard from her in months. My first reaction was confusion. She'd told me she was having dinner with her college friend Sarah, catching up like old times. But nothing about that laugh sounded like a quiet night with a girlfriend. Then I heard my own name, and something in my chest turned to ice. "Preston is so predictable it actually hurts," she was saying, using that tone she saved for when she thought she was being witty. "He thinks paying the bills makes him some kind of hero, like signing checks is the same thing as being a real man." I should have gotten up right then, walked over, asked her what the hell she thought she was doing. Instead, I sat completely still. My client was asking about delivery timelines while my entire world tilted sideways. "He's got no fire left, Dwight," Claudia went on, and hearing another man's name in that context hit me like a fully loaded trailer. No passion, no spontaneity, just work, 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 and those mind-numbing stories about trucking routes and warehouse efficiency. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a calculator. The man's voice was low and sure of itself, the kind of confidence that made my jaw clench. "So why stay?" he asked. "You're only 43, Claudia. You've still got time to start over." "Money," she answered, just like that. I could practically hear her shrug. "Preston's built a nice little empire, and once Daniel graduates and goes to college, I won't feel guilty about taking half. Dwight, this is probably the cruelest thing I've ever said about anyone, but my husband is basically just a financial safety net now. I'm counting down the days until I can cash out." That was the moment I realized I'd just heard the worst thing my wife had ever said about me. And sitting there in that booth, with my client still droning on about shipping schedules, I made a decision that would change everything. She would never see it coming. Somehow, I got through the rest of the dinner. Don't ask me for details. My mind was spinning like a busted compass, but my mouth stayed on autopilot. The client from Memphis shook my hand, said he'd have a decision by Friday, and walked out with no idea he'd just watched a man's life collapse in real time. Claudia was still at her table when I finally stood up. Her back was to me as she leaned in, laughing at something Dwight said. Even from behind, I could read her body language, the way her fingers brushed her neck, the way she played with her hair. That wasn't a casual meal with an old friend. That was a date. I paid my bill and walked past their table on my way out, making sure to get a good look at him. Mid-40s, fit, tailored suit, the type of guy who probably drove a BMW and wouldn't shut up about his CrossFit times at parties. Basically, the walking stereotype of everything I apparently wasn't. Neither of them even glanced at me. Why would they? In Claudia's mind, I was just a faceless ATM with a pulse. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching them through the restaurant windows. They ordered dessert. She fed him a bite of tiramisu. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. It was standard couple behavior, except she was my wife, and he definitely wasn't me. My phone buzzed, a text from Claudia. "Running late with Sarah. Don't wait up. Love you." Love you. Those 2 words used to mean everything. Now they felt like counterfeit cash, same shape, same ink, no value. I drove home in a daze, muscle memory taking me along familiar roads while my brain tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. Daniel was in his room when I got there, doing homework, music leaking under his door. Iris was already asleep, her face soft and calm in the glow of the hallway nightlight. Our kids, my kids, had no idea their mother was getting ready to blow up their lives for a midlife fantasy and a larger bank account. I poured myself a heavy glass of whiskey and sat in my home office, staring at the family photos on the wall. Our wedding day, beach trips, Christmas mornings. For the first time, they all looked staged, like I'd been acting in a play where everyone knew the script, but me. Claudia came home at 11:47 p.m. I recognized the click of her heels on the hardwood, the careful way she closed the front door. She peeked into the office where I was reviewing shipping manifests. "Hey, honey," she said, voice too bright, too light. "How was your dinner?" I looked up at the woman I'd shared a bed with for 18 years and saw a stranger wearing her face. "Productive," I answered. "How's Sarah?" "Oh, you know Sarah," Claudia replied, waving a hand like it was nothing. "Same drama with her ex-husband and her awful job. Poor thing never changes." The lies slid off her tongue so smoothly it was almost impressive. Almost. "I'm heading to bed," she announced, already turning away. "Don't stay up too late with those reports." She kissed my forehead, something that once felt intimate and warm, but now landed like a cheap consolation prize. After she went upstairs, I stayed in that office for another hour, staring at nothing and mapping out my next move. Because this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 20 years of marriage. I called in sick just so I could follow my wife. Claudia left the house at her usual time, 8:15 a.m., coffee in hand, and that fake bright smile she'd been wearing lately. She told the kids she had an early client meeting, kissed them both goodbye, and walked out like it was any other normal workday. I waited 5 minutes, then took my personal car, not the company truck she'd instantly recognize, and slipped into traffic behind her. Nothing fancy, just basic tailing, a husband trying to prove what his gut already knew. She didn't drive to a marketing firm. Instead, she went all the way across town to a coffee shop called The Daily Grind, one of those places that charges $6 for what used to cost 50 cents. I parked across the street and watched through the window as she took a seat at a corner table, checking her phone every 30 seconds like she was counting down. At 9:23 a.m., Dwight walked in. He somehow looked even more put together in daylight. Crisp shirt, high-end watch, that relaxed, careless confidence you only get when you've never had to worry about making payroll or keeping 63 people employed. He slid into the chair across from my wife like he owned the room. I couldn't hear a word they said, but I didn't have to. Their body language said everything, leaning in close, brushing hands across the table, Claudia throwing her head back at whatever he was saying. This wasn't their first coffee. This was a pattern. They stayed exactly 47 minutes. I know, because I watched the clock like my life depended on it, sitting there in my car like some cut-rate private investigator. When they finally walked out to the parking lot, headed to separate cars, he tugged her in for a kiss that went on way too long for a goodbye between friends. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. I followed Claudia to her real office after that, and watched her stroll inside like nothing unusual had happened. Then I drove to my own company, told my assistant I was feeling better, and buried myself in logistics reports, at least on the surface. My hands were on shipping schedules, but my brain was on strategy. That evening I played the role of normal husband. I asked about her day, listened while she spun elaborate lies about client meetings and looming deadlines. She was smooth, confident, detailed, believable. Made me wonder how long she'd been rehearsing this. "How was your client meeting this morning?" I asked casually over dinner. "Exhausting," Claudia said without even a pause. "New campaign for a restaurant chain. They want everything changed at the last minute." Daniel glanced up from his plate. "Which restaurant, Mom?" For half a second, I watched real panic flicker in her eyes. "Oh, it's still confidential," she recovered quickly. "You know how these things work." Our son nodded and went back to eating, but I'd seen it, that tiny crack in her composure. The first visible sign that maintaining the lie was starting to cost her effort. Over the next week, I turned into a man on a mission. On my lunch breaks and after hours, I started building a case. I documented everything: times, locations, call logs I could access through our shared account, credit card charges that didn't match anything she'd told me. The daily grind became their go-to. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, same corner table, same routine. I began taking photos from across the street. Nothing cinematic, just clear, undeniable proof. The real turning point came when I remembered Claudia's long-standing weakness with tech. She had always been careless with passwords, using the same ones for everything, syncing every device and account without a second thought. For someone plotting to gut me financially, her digital security was a joke. From my office computer, I logged into her cloud account. What I found there made my stomach twist. Hundreds of messages between her and Dwight going back 8 months. Pictures I wish I could unsee. But worse than the intimate photos were their conversations about me, about our marriage, and about their timeline. Preston works such long hours he doesn't notice anything, she'd written 3 weeks earlier. I could probably move in with you, and he'd think I'm just staying late at the office. His reply? Not yet. Wait until after the holidays. Let the kids have one more normal Christmas before you blow up their world. One more normal Christmas, like our family was an asset they were planning to liquidate after year-end. The worst messages were recent, just 2 days after I overheard them at the restaurant. He seemed suspicious last night, Claudia texted. Asked more questions than usual about my day. Maybe he's finally waking up. Dwight, we might need to speed up the plan. Her response? No, Preston's too trusting. Always has been. I could tell him the sky is green and he'd ask what shade. We stick to the plan. Daniel graduates in May. Then we make our move. Make our move. Like blowing up my life and marriage was a strategic play on a chessboard, and I was the clueless pawn. I printed everything, made multiple copies, put them in a safety deposit box at a bank clear across town. Then I called the best divorce attorney in the state, a woman named Rebecca Martinez, known for protecting men's assets when their wives tried to take them to the cleaners. Mr. Wells, she said after looking through the pile of evidence, your wife has made several serious mistakes. First, she's documented everything. Second, she's delaying her exit, which gives us time to put protections in place. And third, she clearly doesn't think you're a threat. What do we do next? I asked. Rebecca smiled, calm and deadly. We're going to make sure that when she tries to walk away with half of everything you've built, she leaves with nothing but regret. The hardest conversation of my life happened on a Saturday morning in November. I asked Quentin Hayes, Claudia's brother, to meet me for coffee. Not at the Daily Grind. That place was tainted now. We met at a small diner on the edge of town, where nobody knew us and nobody cared. Quentin was a family therapist, 3 years younger than Claudia, but miles ahead of her in emotional maturity. He'd always been the one person in her family who could call out bad behavior, blood or not. Pri, he said as we settled into a corner booth. You look like hell. What's going on? I slid a folder across the table to him, printed screenshots of their messages and a few carefully chosen photos. Nothing explicit. I wasn't going to put him through that, but it was more than enough to show what his sister had been planning. Quentin read in silence, his face tightening a little more with each page. When he finally finished, he set the papers down and dragged both hands over his face. How long have you known? He asked quietly. 2 weeks, I said. I've been documenting everything since then. Jesus, Preston, I'm so sorry. He shook his head slowly. I knew something was off with Claudia lately. She's been different at family stuff, distant, secretive, but I never imagined this. The kids don't know yet, I said. I have no idea how to tell them. Quentin leaned forward, elbows on the table. Let me help with that. Daniel and Iris are going to need support, real support. They'll need to hear clearly that none of this is their fault. I can help you prepare them for what's coming. We spent the next hour putting a plan together. Quentin would slowly start preparing them emotionally for big changes, without dropping specifics. He'd help me pick the right timing for the conversation and be there if things went off the rails. He also agreed to testify on my behalf when this inevitably turned into a courtroom fight. There's one more thing, I said as we got ready to leave. I need to lock down my business before Claudia figures out what's going on. What do you mean? He asked. She's aiming to take half of everything I've built, I explained. But I've got 63 employees counting on those paychecks. I'm not letting her greed take them down with our marriage. That afternoon, I sat down with my business attorney and my accountant. We restructured the company, transferring my personal shares into a trust designed to protect the business from divorce claims. Completely legal, completely above board, just the kind of asset protection I should have set up years ago. By Monday morning, my logistics company was untouchable. Claudia could try to grab half of everything, but she was going to discover that the everything she'd been planning around was suddenly a lot smaller than she thought. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, she'd complained that I focused too much on work, that I was married to the business. Now that same focus was the reason she wasn't going to bleed it dry. 3 weeks after I discovered the truth, I made the decision that would flip everything on its head. It was a Tuesday morning. Claudia was getting ready for yet another client meeting, which I now knew was code for breakfast with Dwight. She was humming to herself in the bathroom, carefully doing her makeup in a way she hadn't bothered to do for me in months. Happy, content, completely unaware that the ground under her feet was about to vanish. "I'll be late tonight," she called from the bedroom, not even glancing in my direction. Big presentation for the restaurant chain. Might not be home until after 10. The restaurant chain that didn't exist. The presentation that was actually dinner with her boyfriend. "No problem," I said calmly. "I've got some late meetings myself." After she drove off, I sat in my truck in the driveway for a good 10 minutes, staring at the steering wheel and thinking about the call I was about to make. Once I did it, there would be no turning back, no counseling, no trial separation, no working on us. This was the nuclear option, but she'd chosen nuclear first when she decided I was nothing more than a paycheck with legs. I dialed Rebecca Martinez. "I'm ready to file," I told her. "Are you sure, Mr. Wells?" she asked. "Once we serve her, she'll know you've been digging." "I'm sure," I said, "and I want her served at her office, in front of her coworkers. I want people to see who she really is." "That can be arranged," Rebecca replied. "We'll have everything ready by Thursday." That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I made a real family dinner, not takeout, not something defrosted and thrown on a pan. Actual cooking, grilled steaks, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes from scratch. When Daniel walked into the kitchen and saw the table, he raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion, Dad?" he asked. "Can a man cook for his family without needing an occasion?" I joked. The truth was, I knew this might be one of our last normal dinners, and I wanted them to remember it for the right reasons, not as the night everything exploded. Claudia didn't come home until 10:47 p.m., claiming the presentation had run long. I'd kept a plate warm for her, but she barely glanced at it, too busy scrolling through her phone and smiling at messages I knew damn well weren't from any client. "This looks wonderful," she said, tone distant and automatic, like she was reading from a script. "Sorry I missed dinner with everyone." "Don't worry about it," I said, watching her stare at her screen. "There'll be plenty of chances for family dinners in the future." She paused and looked up at me, maybe catching something in the way I said it. But I kept my face calm, neutral. Let her wonder. Let her think she still had control. After 20 years of marriage, I'd become invisible to her. The thing about invisible men is, they see everything. And everything I'd seen was about to tear her carefully curated fantasy apart. By Thursday, I was done waiting. The process server walked into Claudia's office at 2:15 p.m. and handed her the divorce papers. I know the exact time because Rebecca called me as soon as it was done. "It's finished," she said. "Your wife's been served." I was sitting in my truck outside Daniel's school, waiting for his basketball practice to finish, when my phone lit up with Claudia's name. I let it ring out and go to voicemail. She called again, and again. By the time Daniel jogged out to the parking lot, sweaty and flushed from practice, I had 7 missed calls and a string of increasingly panicked text messages from the woman who used to call me boring, predictable, and safe. Now, suddenly, she'd finally noticed me. "Where are you? Call me, now. What the hell is this? You can't just disappear and ambush me like this." Text after text came in like machine gun fire. Daniel climbed into the passenger seat and glanced at my phone just as another call flashed across the screen. "Mom's really trying to reach you," he said. "Yeah," I replied, powering the phone all the way off. "We'll talk to her at home." The drive back was thick with unspoken tension. Daniel kept stealing worried looks at me, clearly picking up that something huge was going on, even if he didn't know what yet. When we pulled into the driveway, Claudia's car was already there. She'd left work early, no doubt racing home the second those papers hit her desk. I found her in the kitchen, pacing like a trapped animal, still clutching the divorce documents. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild with a mix of fury and disbelief. "Preston," she burst out the moment she saw me. "What is this? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "No joke," I said evenly, dropping my keys on the counter. "It's exactly what it looks like." "You can't just file for divorce without talking to me first," she snapped. "Yes, we have issues, but we can work through them. This is insane." I looked at the woman who'd spent months secretly planning to blow up our family and walk away with half of everything I'd built. And now she had the nerve to act outraged that I'd simply move faster. "Work through them with Dwight, you mean?" I asked. The color drained from her face. For a second, she looked like someone who had genuinely forgotten that actions have consequences. "I don't know what you think you know," she started, but I cut her off. "I know everything, Claudia. The coffee shop meetings, the texts, the plan to wait until Daniel graduates so you can take half of my company. I know you think I'm pathetic and boring. I know you think Dwight is more of a partner than I ever was." Her mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. She'd been blindsided, completely unprepared for a confrontation that wasn't happening on her terms. "Where are the kids?" she demanded suddenly registering that Daniel and Iris weren't anywhere in sight. "Quentin picked them up," I said. "They're spending the night at his place while we deal with this." "You told my brother about our personal business?" she shouted. "Your brother deserved to know his sister was about to blow up 2 families for a midlife crisis," I answered. That's when the tears started. Not raw grief, not shock, performance. The same calculated tears she'd probably used on me for years. "Preston, please," she said, reaching out and grabbing for my arm. "We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can get through it together." I stepped back, out of her reach. "No, Claudia, we can't. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. And now, I've got a plan of my own." For the first time in our marriage, she looked at me with something that almost resembled respect. Not love, not warmth, just the realization that the man she'd written off as weak and predictable was gone. She'll never see me the same way again, I thought, watching her struggle to absorb what was happening. And honestly, that felt exactly right. We had the conversation with Daniel and Iris 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, in Quentin's office. I wanted neutral territory, a place that felt safe, where they could react however they needed without feeling pinned down at home. Daniel sat in the chair closest to me, 17 and doing his best to act composed, even though I could see fear and anger simmering just below the surface. Iris curled up on the couch, 14 and still young enough to cling to the hope that this might all be a misunderstanding we could somehow fix. "Kids," I began, "your Uncle Quentin and I need to talk to you about what's been going on with your mom and me." "Are you getting divorced?" Daniel asked, straight to the point. He'd always been direct. I'd encouraged that in him. Now it cut right through the fog. "Yes," I said, "we are." Iris made a small sound, half gasp, half sob. Quentin shifted closer to her, offering quiet support. "Why?" she whispered. "I thought everything was okay." This was the moment I'd been dreading. How do you explain betrayal to a 14-year-old without completely shattering her view of her mother? "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love," I said carefully. "Your mom has been seeing someone else and making plans that didn't include keeping our family together." Daniel's jaw clenched. "For how long?" he asked. "Several months," I admitted. "I knew something was off," he muttered. "She's been different, distracted. She lies about where she goes." Iris was openly crying now, tears running down her cheeks. "Does she not love us anymore?" she asked, voice trembling. "She loves you both very much," I said, and I meant it. "Whatever has happened between her and me, you need to understand this is about our marriage, not about either of you." "Where are we going to live?" Daniel asked. "What happens to us?" "You're going to live with me," I said firmly. "In our house, same schools, same friends, same routines. I'm going to do everything I can to keep your lives as stable as possible." "What about Mom?" Iris asked. "Your mom will always be your mom," Quentin said gently. "She'll still be part of your lives. It'll just look different than before." We stayed there for another hour, answering every question they could get out between anger and tears. Daniel's fury was quiet but intense, aimed at his mother, at the situation, at the unfairness of it all. Iris was heartbroken, trying to understand how the family she trusted could fall apart so fast. All I could do was sit there, tell them the truth without destroying them, and silently promise myself that no matter how ugly things got with Claudia, I would not let this break our kids. "Dad," Daniel said as we were getting ready to leave, "I want you to know I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Mom's been treating you badly for months, and I was starting to lose respect for you because you weren't doing anything about it." His words hit harder than any judge's ruling ever could. My own son had been watching me swallow disrespect, watching me fade into the background, and he'd been losing faith in me because I was too trusting, too passive. "I should have acted sooner," I admitted. "Maybe," he said with a shrug, "but you acted when it mattered. That's what counts." Iris hugged me tightly as we walked out to the car. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart," I told her. "Everything's going to be okay." And for the first time in months, I actually believed it might be. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized in a courtroom that felt more like a conference room than the end of an 18-year marriage. Claudia sat on the opposite side with her attorney, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, worn out, defeated. Her grand romance with Dwight had imploded within weeks of the filing. Once the affair stopped being a fantasy and became real life, lawyers, kids, consequences, he decided she was too much drama and bailed. The man who'd promised to be her partner vanished the moment things got hard. Her lawyer had tried every argument to squeeze more money out of me, but Rebecca had done her job. The business protections we'd set up held. The transfers were legal and airtight. In the end, Claudia walked away with her car, her personal belongings, and a modest cash settlement, enough to cover basic living costs for maybe 2 years if she budgeted carefully. "Mr. Wells," the judge said, "you are awarded primary custody of both minor children with standard visitation rights granted to Mrs. Wells. The property division stands as submitted and agreed." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and grief. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined for us, but it was the ending her choices had earned. After the hearing, Claudia approached me in the hallway. "Pray," she said quietly. She looked older, worn down from months of legal battles and public fallout. "I want you to know I never meant for things to go this far." "What did you mean for them to do?" I asked. She had no answer, because we both knew the truth. She'd planned to keep using me until she didn't need me anymore, and then discard me on her terms. "The kids miss having you around more," I said. That was only half the story. They missed the version of her they could trust. They were also angry at the lies, the cheating, the secrecy. "Can we try to do better, going forward?" she asked. "For Daniel and Iris?" "We can try," I said. "But Claudia, they're not little kids anymore. They know what happened. They're going to need time before they can trust you again." She nodded, eyes filling with tears. "I know I destroyed everything good we had." "Yeah," I said simply. "You did." 6 months later, I got a text from Quentin. Claudia had moved to another state to take a job at a marketing firm in Phoenix. She called the kids every week and flew back once a month, but the easy, natural bond she'd once had with them was gone. "She's trying," Quentin told me during one of our regular check-ins, "but she's rebuilding from zero. That's tough for someone who's used to being adored." Daniel started his senior year with a different kind of maturity. He didn't take family stability for granted anymore. Iris was in counseling, slowly learning to trust again, to separate what happened between her parents from her own worth. Both kids chose to live with me full-time instead of splitting their time. That decision said more than any speech ever could. "You did the right thing, Preston," Quentin said one evening, while we watched Daniel run drills at basketball practice. "It wasn't easy, but you protected them when it counted." I nodded, eyes fixed on my son, driving hard toward the basket. I could see it clearly. He'd learned something watching me fight for them. Sometimes the hardest seasons are the ones that teach you how to stand your ground. 2 years after the divorce, I found myself back in the same diner where I'd first shown Quentin the folder of evidence against his sister. But this time, I wasn't there to talk about betrayal. I was there to celebrate what had come after. Daniel had just been accepted to 3 colleges, including his top choice. His application essay was about resilience and trusting your instincts when something feels off. The admissions counselor told him it was one of the most mature essays she had read from a high school senior. Iris, now 16, was thriving in school and had started dating a boy from her chemistry class. polite, respectful, the kind of kid who shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and cleared the dinner table without being asked. She'd learned to value respect over charm, substance over smooth talk. My logistics company had expanded into 5 states. Part of that growth came from burying myself in work during the worst days of the divorce. But a lot of it came from being forced to rethink everything in order to protect the business. That pressure pushed me into smarter strategies, better systems, and ultimately a stronger operation. You know what I'm proudest of? Quentin asked over his coffee. The kids never saw you lose control. Even when everything was collapsing, you stayed their dad first and foremost. There were nights I wanted to fall apart, I admitted. Nights I'd sit in my truck after tailing Claudia to another meeting and feel like my whole life had been a lie. But you didn't fall apart, he said. You got angry, then you got strategic. He was right. The anger hadn't destroyed me. It had fueled me. It got me through the lawyers, the endless forms, the hard talks with my kids, and the slow rebuilding afterward. Claudia was still in Phoenix. She'd found a new boyfriend, an accountant who seemed solid and kind. The kids met him on their last visit, and both said he treated her well and didn't try to play replacement dad. She seems happier, Iris told me after that trip. More like the mom I remember from when I was little. That's good, I'd said, and I meant it. Whatever bitterness I'd once carried toward Claudia had burned out long ago. What was left was indifference and a choice to focus on the life in front of me, not the wreckage behind me. Recently, I'd started seeing someone new, a woman named Sarah who ran a small business consulting firm. She was divorced too, with a teenage daughter. We met at a Chamber of Commerce event, swapped war stories about single parenting, and realized we understood each other more than we expected. She's different from Mom, Daniel told me after meeting her. More straightforward, less dramatic. Is that good or bad? I asked. Definitely good, he said. Drama is overrated. Iris agreed. Sarah treats you like an equal, she said. Mom always acted like she was doing you a favor by being married to you. Kids have a way of cutting right to the truth. On the drive home from the diner that afternoon, I thought about that night in the Italian restaurant 2 years ago, the moment my old life cracked open. Back then, it felt like the end of everything. Turned out, it was the start. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Daniel's car was already there. He'd driven back from a campus visit. Iris's bike was propped against the garage, which probably meant she was inside sprawled over her books. My family was smaller now, but it was stronger. We were built now on truth instead of pretense, on respect instead of convenience, on love that didn't require anyone to pretend or shrink themselves to fit. Sitting in that booth 2 years ago, listening to the worst thing my wife had ever said about me, I learned something important. Sometimes the cruelest thing someone says about you ends up being the most freeing, because once you finally see where you really stand in someone else's life, you can stop begging for space in it and start deciding where you want to go.